Oh la
Sex with Michele James. If you have the urge, you could just go ahead and rub one out. Hello, and welcome to Sex with Michele James, that is. I am Michele James. I'm your host. I have been working in the adult film industry for a little over a year and a half now. And it has been the greatest year and a half experience that I've probably ever had in my life. I've learned a lot. And in learning and joining the industry, I get to share all of this information and knowledge with you guys on this podcast. So I'm super excited. I believe the reason why we're starting this podcast is because we want to spread positivity, both in sex and body positivity, just everything positive around sex itself, because a lot of people believe there is such a stigma around sex and no one ever wants to talk about it. So we're going to break that barrier in this show and just break down barriers, have fun, learn a lot of things, and get to actually know each other. So I started my career, I should say, in sex work back in 2017. I was an amateur content creator for the site called manyvids.com. I was making solo masturbation. Every now and then I'd have a male talent with me that I was able to do boy-girl content. And I was on Craigslist, actually, creepy as that sounds. And I reached out to an agent that was based out of Florida. And I said, hey, here's pictures, here's my resume, my age, all this stuff. Like, here's the link to my ManyVids. Let me know if I have a chance to start in the professional side of porn, more mainstream and not so much amateur. They got back to me, and I didn't end up signing with that agency that I had originally reached out to, but someone else, another agency from California, reached out to me and said, hey, we're interested in having you. Let's fly you out to California. So I flew out to California. I shot a week's worth of mainstream content. I came home to reflect on the business and the industry itself and thought, I actually think I can do this. And if I put all my hard work and determination into it, I will be a star. So I took a few months off, got my body to where I was comfortable, signed with a new agent in March of last year, and here I am, exploding, making a living, having fun. So enough about me. I'm excited to share this experience with you guys and tell you everything I've been through. I also want to teach the viewers what I know, and I want to bring in guests who, if I can't teach you something, can. So I want the goal for this show to be that we all leave here sex positive, body positive. We have better sex, and we love who we are, and we own it. Okay, our next segment here is going to be Reader Questions with Michele James. Yay! Okay, first question. How do you make sure anal sex isn't painful or messy? And I love this question because this is probably the worst question I could have been asked, because I've only done anal in mainstream once for Tushy.com with Mick Blue, and I don't really prefer to do it in my personal life. I'm just not a fan of it right now, at least. I haven't hit that sexual peak in my life where I want to do anal yet. But my advice from what I experienced the first time I did anal, as far as not being painful, I learned a lot from other girls in the industry who actively do anal, and the biggest thing they could express to me about not having painful anal intercourse is stretching. So the night before I went to set, I laid in bed, on the floor, in the bathroom, wherever I felt comfortable, and I bought these butt plugs that were like different diameters as they went up. So it started real small, and then they got to real big in diameter. So I would start off with a little one, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of lube. So lots of lube, try to relax, just try not to stress or tense up, because obviously your anal muscle is, your anal hole, your butt is a muscle. So if you're tense and you're stressed out, it's not going to want to stretch with you. So my advice would be to be calm. Then you start with the smallest butt plug you can find. I have heard many conflicting things. Some girls like silicone, some girls like glass. There's a bunch of other ones, but just something soft, my preference, because you don't want to cut your butthole either. So you start off with the smallest one. You leave it in, get comfortable, maybe get up, walk around. So like, okay, this is what it feels like to have something in the butt. And then after maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, whenever you're comfortable, slide that one out, more lube, slide the second size in, and so on and so forth. If you come to a point where it's starting to get painful and you feel like you're going to tear, stop completely, go back down a size, work with it a little bit. If you have toys that are the same diameter, try to work some toys in a little bit. But the most important thing is just to be calm and not to stretch too fast, because that's when it will become painful and you could tear your anus, and that's not something you want to do. So slow and steady. Soft sex toys, start with the smallest, work your way up, be calm, comfortable, and lots of lube. As far as not being messy, enemas. This is the most awkward thing to talk about, because it was really like the most traumatic experience for me when I had to do this myself. But I had to lay in the bathtub and I filled up, it was like an enema bottle, but I didn't use the liquid that was inside of it. I dumped it out and put warm water inside the bottle, shook it up. Lay on your side, and I wish I could over a podcast explain to you how this is going to look, but lay on your side, get comfortable, stick the head of the enema up your butt, squeeze, and let it naturally come out. But I also heard from a gay performer that actually if you squish the water up there and clench your butt cheeks together and do high knees around the house, that it helps move the fluid in and around your immediate anal area, and it'll help flush you out faster. So you do that a couple times the night before. As far as performing, we as women, and I'm sure men do it too, we'd stop eating the night before. So after 6 or 7 p.m., we try not to eat anything super high in fiber. If you do want to eat and it's essential that you eat something that's not high in fiber, proteins, stuff like that. So you stop eating the night before, and that helps your body rid itself. So you're not trying to poop first thing in the morning when you have to go perform. So when you wake up in the morning, I don't know, 8, 9 hours later again, but the next morning you don't want to overdo it, because then it's just runny and messy. So you enema maybe once or twice before you go to set, and then once or twice again when you get to set, stretch a little bit. The biggest thing with not being messy is try not to over enema your butthole, because like I said, it will get runny, and then you can take 2 Imodium, and that'll help your body not give you massive diarrhea as well from doing the enema so much. So I also know a lot of other female performers who actually don't use enemas at all. So it's basically you have to find what your body's okay with, because there's been some times where I've played with toys in my ass without doing any cleaning, without stopping eating, without taking any Imodium, and I never had a problem. So you have to pretty much work with your own body to find out what works for you for anal. But as far as painful, we said lots of lube, stretching, messy, don't enema so much, and just find out what works for your body. Question 2. Do you do vaginal or anal bleaching? What brands do you use? I actually have never bleached my vagina or my butthole. So this question does not apply to me, and I don't want to give any advice because I've never heard of anyone who's done it either. So I'm going to skip that one. What is actually happening when you squirt? Can you teach me? What is actually happening when you squirt? And I'm new to this. I actually just taught myself how to squirt a few months ago with my Hitachi. And for those of you who don't know what a Hitachi is, you need to invest in one. If you're a woman, you are missing out if you do not have one of these in every nook and cranny of your house. It is a vibrator, and I put it on a medium setting, and I think I had either a butt plug in or maybe a Lush toy in and I held it on my vagina to the point where I got so like clitoral stimulation, like so much clitoral stimulation that like I just gushed out. And it was like, holy fuck, like did I just squirt? And then I did it again, and sure as shit, it was definitely squirting. Like it was just such a rush of like pleasure that I just could not hold back. And there has been a lot of speculation both in the industry and outside the industry what squirt actually is. And if you ask me, probably 90% of squirt is piss. And I don't care if people are like, you're just not doing it right, then you might be pissing, but I definitely don't piss. It's fucking piss. Okay? It's piss. If you ever go on a porn set where they've done a squirting scene and there's a leather couch and you walk into the room, it smells like fucking piss because a lot of the components of squirt is piss. Yeah, there might be a couple percent in there that's actually like female ejaculation fluid, but it's piss. And people argue, well, piss is yellow and squirt is clear. Let me tell you, if you drink enough water and Gatorade and Pedialyte before you go to a set and you just start squirting everywhere, it's going to be clear, but it can still be piss. Can I teach you? I would love to teach you personally, but I'm just going to tell you from my experience how I squirt. I've never squirted from penetration, but like I said, most of the sex questions is based on the person alone. I've known people that have squirted so easily just from being touched, from being penetrated, to people who have never squirted in their entire lives. So me personally, I have to use my Hitachi and it's straight on my clit and it just comes gushing out. So if you're a female and you're wondering how to squirt, start there, get a Hitachi, sit it with, I don't know, get comfortable in your room. Make sure you have a towel or somewhere where you're not okay with like pissing all over anything. But use your Hitachi on the clit and see if that works for you. And if you get comfortable doing that and you can squirt, lay down and start using a toy to see if you could squirt from penetration. It's basically trial and error. And don't ever be ashamed if you can't do it, because I'm 23 now and I just squirted for the first time literally a couple months ago. And I thought all my life, I'll never squirt because it's never happened. You have to get comfortable with your body. You have to be in a place of comfort, because I dated a girl and she tried like hell for months, like fingering me, trying to get me to squirt. And I would get so close until I realized it was a mental thing, that it was like a mental block. I'm not comfortable. I'm afraid I'm going to piss on her. Couldn't do it. But when I'm home and I'm comfortable with myself and my body and I'm learning, that's when it happens. So that's my advice to you, is to take your time, work with your body, try to do the Hitachi thing, try to add penetration in. And if you can't, then you can't. But it's definitely not impossible, and you just have to work with your body. Okay, next question. If you could do a scene with any person, living or dead, porn star or non-porn star, who would it be? Oh, that's tough, because there's a lot of people I want to fuck. A lot. I would definitely have to go with my celebrity crushes, which is probably Jake Gyllenhaal and what's their name? Margot Robbie. Yeah, her, the girl from I, Tonya, that movie. She's pretty hot. So I would definitely choose them if they were down for it. So if you're listening to this and you want to like have sex with me, please hit me up on Twitter, which, by the way, if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it is at Michele with one L James MV, like Mary Victor. Same with my Instagram, same handle. And don't forget to also follow the Pittsburgh Current. Next question. What is the first porn you've ever seen, and what did you think? Honestly, I've watched so much frickin' porn in my life that I honestly could not even tell you what the first video I stumbled upon was. But I could probably tell you at that time it was either probably something that Tori Black or Adriana Chechik was casted in, because that was all I watched when I first started watching porn, was them. And Tori Black taught me how to suck a dick, and Adriana Chechik taught me how to be a crazy fucking slut and live your life and not take any judgment or shit from people. So that's probably what my first porn that I ever saw was. It had something to do with either of those two performers. Our last question today for our question segment is, have you ever fallen for a co-star? And it's actually funny that this question has been submitted, because about a month ago, I got booked for a scene for Tonight's Girlfriend, which is a subcategory for naughtyamerica.com. You can find the scene on tonightsgirlfriend.com if you'd like to go find the scene that I'm talking about. But I got booked with a performer that I had never worked with before. His name was Brad Newman, and I'm so nervous. And the first thing I do anytime I get booked with someone I've never worked with before, you go to Pornhub and you look at their stats. Like, especially if it's a guy, if I've never worked with you before, I'm doing so much Google research on how big your dick is, like how thick it is, how long it is, how hard you fuck. Like, I want to know everything. And then I'm going to all my girlfriends in the agency, other performers not in my agency. I'm asking, like, have you ever fucked like so-and-so? Like, what's his dick like? Oh, it's big? Oh, did it hurt? Okay. So I'm doing those type of things. So I look him up and I'm like, oh my God, his dick's like huge. Like, it's going to fucking kill me. There's no way. Like, I want to cancel the scene right now. Like, his dick is massive. So I'm on set and he shows up and he's super nice, super kind, like comes over and he's like flirting and blah, blah, blah. While I'm like flirting with him back and I'm like, I'm kind of like in love with you. Like, you're kind of, I think you're my soulmate type shit. And we start fucking and it was like the best sex that I've ever had, not only on camera, but I think if it wasn't being recorded, it was probably the best sex I've ever had in my life. It was pretty great. Like, we had such great chemistry. And after the scene, we're like, hey, like, let's hang out. Like, let's go have a drink. Like, let's have more of each other. And we ended up literally getting an Uber together, going back to the model house that I was staying in, and fucked for literally like 4 more hours. And he ended up staying the night. And I think it was the start of like a great relationship. And here I am almost 2 months later, and we still talk almost every day. And that was probably the closest that I've gotten to falling for a co-star. I've also like been in love with Cadence Lux since before I even got into porn. So shout out to you, babe, if you're listening. She is my girlfriend right now, so I guess that does count as falling for a co-star. But we didn't fall in love on set. Like, she was with my agency, so we were already like romantically involved before we actually got to shoot together. So yeah, those are the 2 loves of my life in the industry, which would be Cadence Lux and Brad Newman.
You're listening to Sex with Michele James on the Pittsburgh Current Podcast Network.
We are here with our first ever guest, Nicolette. Nicolette, tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where did you come from? What do you do?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Well, I'm originally from Chicago and born and raised. And I came to Pittsburgh because I fell in love with the city.
How couldn't you? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And I was working, I just finished my master's and was working on my PhD in sex education policy. The reason I also came here was because I decided to open up a dance company. That was kind of the way that I supported myself throughout my PhD, because my professors were very brutally honest and said that I would probably not get any funding for my research because it was in sex ed.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I was kind of doing dancing on the side and decided to test the waters and see about running a dance studio. So now I do those both at the same time.
So you're a dance instructor and a sex educator.
Yes.
Do you love it?
I love it. It gets a little bit insane with the dance studio. We now have 12 other instructors, and it's grown into like a massive full-time thing. Trying to slowly ease back a little bit and have other people do more work so I can actually focus more on the sex ed stuff. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. This is such a loaded interview because I love sex education. Like, that's what I push on all my platforms for my fans is sex education. Where do you want to start? I mean, I could go on for hours with this. Let's start with,
well, let's start with sex is for everyone.
Okay, perfect starting point.
Because
yes.
I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people think it's only for certain groups, only for certain, it can only be for if you're married, it can only be if you're young, it can only be if, you're in this certain age. One of my articles that I wrote in college was all about masturbation. Babies, fetuses, masturbate in the womb. It's a fact.
Are you serious?
It is, yes. Yeah, so, the fact that self-pleasure is so important in order to be able to have a very sexually satisfying life. Yes, it starts all the way back when you're in someone else's body.
Wow. Are there any negative effects on either your life in general, your health, if you aren't having sex, if you aren't masturbating, if you're not?
So I mean, there's not a lot of research in that area necessarily. I would say there's some discussion regarding if you have a lot of guilt and shame and therefore withhold pleasure from yourself, then that's tied with depression. That's tied with not a lot of positive effects on your health and state of mind. I mean, there are some people that don't need to masturbate because they just don't feel the urge, and that's awesome. Like, that's on them. But the majority of people do masturbate. Men, women, kids, older adults, every gender, every person under the sun, most people. And so if you feel the urge, and you're in a place that you can, and you're keeping it from yourself for whatever reasons, whether you just feel it, you shouldn't, whether you had some really negative education earlier on that makes you feel like this isn't a right to your own body, then I mean, I've met people who've become really upset at themselves, really negative towards their bodies because they feel like that's not a right for their own body.
Really? So you're saying it is okay if you do or don't, but if you have the urge, you can just go ahead and rub one out, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, not necessarily right now on this couch.
No,
yes.
Absolutely. This is
in a more private setting.
Safe for work.
Yes. The only reason I say that is because I'll have some person later on respond, well, basically, you're advocating that everyone needs to have, masturbate all the time.
Well, personally, I think you should, because I do. I make money off masturbating for a living. But
there are times and places. The same as like you can't eat in certain places. You shouldn't necessarily masturbate.
Yes.
Every single time you have that urge.
Depends who you ask. I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. All right, Nicolette, let's move on. Still obviously talking about sex here. What is the biggest misconception with sex education that you've personally experienced?
The biggest misconception, I would say, is that sex education promotes and says everyone should have sex. That's not the message at all. The message is the majority of people, we need to be realistic. The majority of people, 98% of people, will have sex at some point in their lives. And all of us, 100% of people, 1,000% of people know someone who will have sex. Therefore, you need to have the information to make sure that you make those decisions as responsibly, as healthily, and as happily as possible in whatever way you want to use it. But you need to know what's out there in order to make those the best decisions for yourself, or to pass on that information to someone who might need that.
What is the most important part of sex education? Like, what is something you nail, no pun intended, you nail every time you speak to someone or you're doing a class? Like, what is the most important thing that you stress to people about sex?
The most important thing I stress is that you need to feel good in order to do it. And you need to make sure, if you are doing this with a partner, that your partner is feeling good. And so this is a lot of enormous amount of communication within your own self and really getting in touch with your own body and your own desires, needs, feelings, which is really hard to do. I mean, I see this play out even on the dance floor when we're not even talking about sex. People have a very hard time to internally reflect on things within themselves because there's a lot of negative judgments, right, that we have about our bodies, about the way that we move, and it has nothing to do even with the bedroom. So this is something that takes a lot of work over your whole lifetime, being able to really connect with yourself and find out what you like, what you might not like, what you might want to explore, and that might change over time. And at the exact same time, being able to check in with your partner and communicate to your partner and receive exactly what they are saying and honoring that when we are doing this together. So that's really important. Those are like the two biggest cruxes of it.
Absolutely, communication. I can't stress that enough to everyone who asks me, like, how do I get good at sex, or how do I do this, or how do I do that? It's communication. Talk to your partner. Ask, does this feel good? Because I'm to the point now where I've had sex so much, obviously, that I'm really good with reading body language. So if I'm doing something, I can read their body language to know if I'm doing it well or not.
Yeah.
So, yeah, communication is a huge, huge thing. But aside from communication, I feel another thing that is very, very important is sexual safety. And I feel like we don't talk about it enough. And let's talk about safe sex, STIs, and the risks associated with sexual education.
Well, I guess the first thing I want to preface all of that is anytime that you are any closer than what we are, there is a risk with transferring bacteria, viruses, period. And there's still a lot of stigma when it comes to, if I kiss you, then that sexualness of it makes whatever we just transferred even more egregious. But if if we're hugging, or if we just share a drink and I pass my cold to you, well, that's normal, because everyone has colds.
Yeah.
Like, the majority of folks have had a sexually transmitted infection. In fact, the people that are watching right now probably have one currently, because the majority of people have cold sores. Cold sores are HSV and
herpes simplex virus.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
And so a lot of people don't think about it as a sexually transmitted infection. It is, but you most likely got it from your aunt kissing you on the lips, or your mom or your dad. That's a sexual act. But because most of us see it on each other, it's not talked about in a sexual manner, that people are like, oh, it's just a cold sore. I have to remind people in classes, well, that cold sore, if you go down on someone,
thank you. Can we talk about this?
Totally I've
had people try to tell me that you can't give someone HSV2 from one, but you
totally can.
So if I have a cold sore outbreak on my lip,
yes,
and I start to blow my male partner, he is able to get type 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, really, the difference between type 1 and type 2 is under the microscope.
Does it have to does he have to have an open sore, or can it just
be? So it's skin to skin contact.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like, it's 100% transmission.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Definitely, depending on the person's immune system, depending on if there's more of an open skin,
like razor burn, or
and there's typically a higher incidence of transmission if it's in a place that has higher mucous membranes. So like the tip of the head, the softer part, the back of your throat where there's like softer palate. Those are easily, like, fluids, bacteria are more easily transmitted through there versus just on actual like tougher skin. But there's a chance, right? However small in some ways. The only differences between 1 and 2 is microscopically, and since most of us won't actually get a microscope, you really won't know the difference. A cold sore is a cold sore. It's a bump. It's painful for some people, really painful for others. It lasts for a while. There are some literature that says, the ones on the mouth last longer or shorter. I think the one on the mouth is your outbreaks are not quite as often as the one on the genitalia. Honestly, every person is different. The way that, I've spoken to physicians and had people tell me about their own outbreaks, it really just varies on your lifestyle, your immune system, and where you are, what you are, who you are. And
they always that saying that like 1 in 4 people have herpes, and they never have an outbreak, or 2, they just for some reason act like it's not.
Well,
what
so
it
it's
is.
1 in 4 people have an STI in general.
Okay.
Currently have it, I believe it is. I think the numbers for for cold sores and herpes is like 90% of the population.
90% of the population has either
it's very
one or
high.
two.
Yeah. I mean, and most people don't know it. There are people that have had one outbreak in their life and never have an outbreak again because
or they never
dormant,
have one.
because it becomes dormant in your body. So this is not like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's a fact of our lives.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, I've experienced cold sores my whole life. I've never had an genital outbreak. That's not to say I don't have type 2, but I've definitely have had cold sores in my mouth since.
And type 1 can travel to type 2. I mean, it's not like it really is.
It's just the contact.
Yes, the contact. Okay. And apparently type 2 is more like needs a more moisture area. Okay. And so that there is an easier way if you have type 2 on your lips, it's easier potentially for it to be transmitted on the genitals. But honestly, both are pretty moist, soft areas of our bodies. And therefore, if you have whichever one it is on your lips, you could potentially, if you go down on someone, you can potentially transmit it to them on the genitals.
Absolutely. And it's possible to get STIs, right? Is that what they're calling them now?
Sexually transmitted infections.
Okay. You're able to get those in your throat too, right? You can get gonorrhea, chlamydia.
Yes.
And does that show symptoms the same as having it
on
in your genitals?
In the genitals. So it depends. Gonorrhea, chlamydia are all fluid based. They're transmitted through fluid, so semen, vaginal secretions. And so the symptoms typically, some can be completely asymptomatic and you won't find out unless you're swabbed by a doctor. But some symptoms can be irritation. In the genitals, typically you'll have a different discharge. And so you don't really have a discharge as much through your mouth, in the throat, unless you get a little bit more sick. So really it just depends. Typically within the throat, it's less symptomatic than it is on the genitals, but you can definitely be a carrier of it, right, inside of your mouth, and not know because you're not having any symptoms, and pass it on to your partner onto their genitals.
Okay. So that's a big thing we need to talk about, because people always watch porn and they say, well, you fuck without condoms and you do this and you do that. I cannot stress enough to viewers, just anyone in general, to always, always, always use a condom. If you're not going to do what I'm about to tell you next, but get tested.
Yes.
Oh, like the amount of people who are constantly sexually active and never get tested, it scares me, because there are sexually transmitted infections that you can have and not show symptoms for, and you're letting that just stay in your body and you're transferring it to people. What are the side effects of not having, if you can answer, not having STDs treated?
Well, so it's various. It depends on the STI. There are some that lead to infertility. There are some that lead to really painful sores. A lot of people have no symptoms. And so for them, they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. I mean, a lot of men carry HPV on their penis and they have absolutely no clue, but they can transmit it to their partner. A lot of it is honestly just responsibility for our own bodies and for the health of people around us, right? The big thing I want to really stress is there's an enormous amount of stigma around STIs. We really shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, this is a horrible thing. It's normal. It's completely normal. The same as a cold.
No, I mean, it is horrible though, because for the first time, and I'm not afraid to admit this, I tested positive for gonorrhea almost 2 months ago now, and I was asymptomatic, didn't have a single symptom at all. I was actually in the shower getting ready to go to set when the testing facility called and said, you need to come in and take these antibiotics. And I'm like, for what? And they're like, you've tested positive for gonorrhea. I cried so hard for like 3 hours. I'm like going to the clinic crying, coming back from the clinic crying. And it scared me, because had I not have gotten tested, I was showing no symptoms, I wouldn't have known. And I know gonorrhea, like if you go without treating it for a while, you can get pelvic inflammatory disease, infertility, like all of these things. And I don't know why people are so ashamed of it. Like me, did I feel like kind of bad when I tested positive? Yeah, obviously it's just a work hazard from being in porn, you know what I mean? Like that's what you sign up for. You have sex every day unprotected, like you might run that chance of getting an STD. astonishes me, the amount of people that don't get tested. But I see it all the time, like friends from my hometown. I mean, people in general just going out and sleeping with people and not thinking of the repercussions. And HPV is a big one. I had HPV when I was 15. I got, swabbed, and they told me I had HPV. I don't have the one that causes cervical cancer, and I don't have the one that causes warts. But a lot of people don't know, because you won't show symptoms of having HPV unless you're going to a doctor and physically getting checked. Like, they had to scrape my cervix to test the cells to find out that I had it. So people need to stop being ashamed. Go get tested. If you're not, even if you're using a condom, because correct me if I'm wrong, you can still
condoms are not 100% effective, right? They're amazing. Everyone should use them. If you're not trying to get pregnant, or if you are not fluid bonded with your partner.
Yes.
But yes, I mean, some sexually transmitted infections are not on the genitalia. They can be around, for example, syphilis. So you definitely want to go and see a doctor. I mean, this is, for me, while I completely am sympathetic to, like, oh my gosh, no one wants to go and find out that they have gonorrhea, but it's also like, it's just, you want to think about it. You know how the whole campaign we're doing now, when you get a cold now, like cough into your arm, stay home, take care of yourself, don't spread it to others. This is just a part of being responsible humans, right? Like, gonorrhea, chlamydia, you won't die from these things. HPV, there's like 20 different strains.
HPV could turn into cervical cancer, which could kill you.
Like, yes, but it's like 1%. More people die from the cold, the common cold, every single year than we do from any of these things in this country, right? So no one's freaking out and going insane when someone has a cold, and that's because we see it on a lot on a daily basis. Right now, I have 3 kids in my dance studio that are coughing everywhere because they have the cold, and their parents signed them up for summer camp, and so they're here in our dance studio, and I just have to make sure I take a couple more airborne things and like vitamins. But this is, you should take care of your partners, you should take care of yourself, but it's also not the end of your life. Not that I'm saying you said that, but like, I think we sometimes we have such a fear of like, oh my God, what happens if, therefore I don't want to go to the doctor and find out. I have the same with like, what are these percentage of, I forget what percentage, but the majority of men don't go to the doctor.
Never. Men can literally be missing a limb, and they're like, "No, it's fine. Like, I can just
and
put
a lot
Band-Aid
of guys and that I've spoken with, because I've like had these conversations, and they're just like, I don't want to find out if I have it, because then I'm just gonna freak out about it.
No,
and
that's so true, though.
That is not the right way to deal with this.
My dad refuses to go to the doctor because he's afraid he's gonna walk in and they're gonna tell him that he has cancer. So I believe that men are probably less likely to get tested than women. But if you're watching this, if you're listening to this,
please
if you're
get tested. Go get a physical.
Go
it's just
get
important.
tested. It's
because
not
that's
a bad thing.
Also why there's a higher percentage of men dying from like really catastrophic, really big things like heart attacks, stroke, I think. Only because if you let it go, you not getting tested is not going to make it go away. It's just that you're going to end up having a much more serious issue later on in life, and ignoring that issue is not going to help you.
Absolutely.
Finding out earlier can really make it go away a lot faster and completely recover and be totally fine, whatever it is, right? You break an arm and you think you might have maybe just fractured it. Ignoring that fracture is not going to help you heal this arm.
Absolutely.
And then later on, you might end up like never being able to use your arm if you don't go to the doctor and get it checked out. The same thing with STIs. They're not like insane, crazy things, but they are something that you should take care of, because now I have friends who are having issues trying to get pregnant, or I have people that tell me, oh my gosh, we're trying and we're not able to, and they find out that they had a STI that they didn't ever know about or didn't ever get resolved.
So will it stay with you? Like, say you do test positive and you never get treated, will you stay spreading it, or is there like a period to where it'll like heal on its own, dormant?
So it depends on, again, it does depend on your immune system. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into kind of all the theories on how long this can be potentially spread. I do know, the same even with like HPV, no, even like with herpes, for example, like it stays dormant until it surfaces on the top of the skin, and you start to feeling that tingly things. So I do know like each infection is a little bit different. Even if it becomes dormant, regardless, in your own body, like the ones that are associated with infertility, it causes scarring inside of your genitalia, and therefore that scarring doesn't just heal itself. It's there and it's permanent. So I'm sure that there's some ways to go about fixing that, but it's not ideal if it reaches that point.
Want
so you want to
make
get
sure
it
you
before,
catch it, which is why you should get tested. Yeah,
get tested, take care of your body, go for a physical, say hello to your doctor, because they're there for you to make you like as healthy and wonderful as possible.
Yes, absolutely.
And by the way, men are not the only ones that don't go to the doctor. I know lots of women that don't.
Oh, absolutely.
And every gender, like it's just this, I think we have this fear of like, if I know, therefore I'm going to have to deal with it. And that's okay. That's totally fine to be able to deal with it. And there's lots of wonderful places that will help you deal with it and make sure that you're healthy and all good. And you're all good even if you have it. It's not like this like huge thing.
To me, it was more like just the punch in the gut, the first time I've ever tested positive, because I literally get tested every 2 weeks with being in the industry, and I've been in for over a year and a half now, and it's like the first time I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And then it like got me thinking, because before I got into porn, and I hate to admit this, but like I was reckless. Like I was having sex without condoms with multiple men in the same week, and I never got tested.
Yeah.
So
which is very common.
Personally, like I popped positive for gonorrhea a month ago, and I consider that my first time, but I don't know that I never had it growing up because I never got tested. And it's hard as, I don't know, I guess being a minor, walking into a clinic and being able to get tested, because I know my parents personally, I grew up Catholic, and they said, no sex, like we're not even going to teach you about condoms, just don't have sex. So even if I was actively having sex, I'd probably be afraid to try to get into the clinic to get tested without my parents knowing, because most of the time they're always like, oh, like, where's your parents? Especially if you're under 18. You know what I mean? So is there an alternative?
If you're 16 and up, I believe, you have the right to get, in fact, in some states it's 12 and up.
Okay.
You have the right to seek medical help, and your parents are, like, if you say you don't want them to be contacted, they won't.
Okay.
So there is some age limit that is definitely below adult 18. I'm blanking on it this exact second. I know when I was in high school, lots of people would go to Planned Parenthood and get birth control and get tested because they are very non-judgmental and really helpful about and being realistic about the realities of the majority of adolescents will have sex. Vast majority, and so they want to make sure you're as healthy as possible so that you don't, make yourself and everyone else sick.
Yeah, and I know a lot of you viewers are probably thinking or on that train right now that, Planned Parenthood's only for abortions. If you're listening or watching this right now, please get that thought out of your mind, because they do provide great resources and services for getting tested, providing condoms, education about STDs, and all of that. So we need to get that stigma that Planned Parenthood is only for abortions out now, because
they're one of the only providers in the majority of places in the United States that is completely committed to education, protection, prevention, before you ever have to deal with having a pregnancy that you were never planning on having. So I think this is one of the most important key things that you need to remember, is that there are a lot of places like crisis pregnancy centers that are saying like, oh, you're pregnant, you can just go and, adopt the kid out, or here are some other choices. But they're also very anti-birth control. They're very anti-condoms. They're very anti-education. And to me, that makes absolutely no sense.
None.
Because it's not like this little thing in your body all of a sudden, I don't know. It's just, you need to have the information. I want that struck. Can you strike it? Whatever that last thing. I was about to say creature. Sorry. It's just like, yes. Sorry. What was my last thing? That they don't, they don't, you can strike, go off. Like I finished with, They don't provide any other information or services. And so this is just, it really does a disservice to people if you're just going in towards the end, basically, of this cycle where someone is already pregnant and they're dealing with this. Yeah. Can't we be preventative and actually go and address people having sex?
Yeah.
And because no matter how many times you want to tell them no, people are having sex and exploring.
That's another thing. Like, why is that a thing? Like, there's people, like, because I sit on Facebook all day in news sections reading comments, and I love to debate. And it's always like middle-aged, older white women that are constantly like, oh, well, don't be a slut. Don't open your legs. You should only have sex with your husband. Blah. Shove it up your fucking ass, lady. Yeah. Just because you've only been laid once in your life by your fucking mediocre penis husband, like, and you haven't tested the waters anywhere else. Like, don't shame women for having sex, for one. And two, you want to say no one have an abortion. Don't use abortions. Like, don't get pregnant. Why aren't we talking about preventing pregnancy to begin with? Mm-hmm. Why saying stop abortion? Why don't we say more sex education?
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's teach birth control, condoms, that you can get pregnant when you're not ovulating, that pre-cum can get you pregnant, correct? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, people don't talk about these things, and there's not enough education. Like, before I even started porn, I didn't know what bacterial vaginosis was. Mm-hmm. The first time I had it, I fucking panicked. Yeah. I was like calling the gynecologist, like, get me in half an hour, like, help me. Yeah. And I didn't know half of this until I got into porn, and it was only because of porn that I learned about this stuff. And I tell my own friends, because my friends were like, oh, I had that and I never knew what it was, and I was just terrified. I didn't have sex for a week. Yeah. Like, I shouldn't have to be the ones telling my fucking friends. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's sickening, the lack of education that we have towards sex because of the stigma itself. Yeah. That you shouldn't be having it, and you should wait till marriage, and you should only have sex with one person. That should not be a thing.
Well, so, like, I want to approach it on two ways. First, there's no other subject in the entire world that we address, like, information about this way. Mm. Oh, you're going to learn to fly and pilot a plane when you decide to get in the cockpit, right? Or when like no one does this stuff, right? Like, you're just going to learn, like, when you walk through the door. Yeah. It'll just happen.
When you get there. Like you're just going to get on this bike and go down the hill, and you're going to learn how to stop and steer. Like, oh.
It just makes no sense. Yeah. So I actually, for my master's thesis, I interviewed sex educators in private and public organizations. And one of them was an evangelical pastor who was extremely honest and actually there's a movement in the evangelical Christian communities about being really frank about sexuality, because they've seen, and what he talked about was a reality. First off, divorce rates are extremely high in this country, right? And as he put it, when you're constantly saying sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad, say no, we're not going to give you any other information, and then you magically put a ring on someone's finger, they're not going to all of a sudden think, oh wow, I'm going to have amazing, fabulous sex with my partner now that I've been told all this horrible information about my body and my partner's body this whole entire time.
And the thing is, they teach you not to masturbate either. So you grow up never having sex, you marry your partner, and then you get into bed and it's like, wow, I don't even know what I like because I've never experienced with my body. And you both go in there not knowing anything about sex. Oh God, it makes me want, it makes my head explode.
Issues. Oh yeah, like, it's crazy. And the fact that the majority of people, if they don't have any information from sexuality, from people, like from schools, from educators, from reputable books, from reputable people that will give them the honest truth about this, their main consumption of sex information is from mainstream pornography.
Let me say it, because I was literally about to say it. You cannot get your sex education from watching porn. Please stop. Yeah. Stop. You can watch porn for pleasure. Whatever, but please do not use that as a platform to learn anything about sex. Please do not look at,
I would put a little caveat on there. It's definitely not a place to, like, it's in some ways a fantasy land, right?
Absolutely.
It's media, it's television, it's something that will push the envelope in different ways and will, potentially tingle everything in your body. But it's not a place where, you very in mainstream pornography, and there are different types of pornography out there, but in majority of it, there's not a lot of communication. There's not a lot of
but
protection.
What people don't understand is that happens behind the scenes.
Yes, exactly. You're not going to see that on camera most of the time.
If you watch Kink is very good at this. They do an intro interview and an outro interview that says
kink.com?
Yes. You know, they talk about like, hi, my name's Michele James. I'm going to be performing hardcore bondage today. Yes. These are my limits. This is what I want to try. They give you like a 2-page checklist.
Oh yeah.
Of things like, are you okay with being waterboarded? It's amazing.
It is amazing. It's
and
amazing.
People see the finished product of porn and they think, oh, like it's okay just to go ahead and choke her out.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't realize, like, when between cuts, I look at my male partner and I say, I'm okay with being choked. Squeeze on the sides. Anyone watching / listening, don't fucking push down on someone's actual trachea.
Mm-hmm.
Squeeze the sides.
Yeah.
You don't have to put pressure directly on the throat.
Yeah.
On the sides.
Yeah. But it's the same as like all games. Like when you watch kids on the playground, no one's like, oh my gosh, like just randomly running up and tackling someone most of the time. Yeah. You talk about it. You talk about it all week. I want to go to the playground with you and like rustle and tumble and I'm going to put you in a headlock, man. And like there's a ton of communication with kids. Yeah. In fact, we sometimes talk about sexuality as imagining you're back in the playground. Like, I want to go on the slide. You want to go on the slide with me? And if my partner says yes, we go on the slide together. If she says no, I'm going to maybe go on the slide by myself. Or maybe she'll go and say, let's go in the sandbox together. I'll be like, you know what? Sure, but I'm going to just play on the sides of the sandbox because I don't want to get my feet like all sandy. And so this is communication and negotiation that happens both in the playground and in the bedroom and the kitchen table. Like this is the stuff that is the reality of life. And we need to constantly be reminded of it and talk about it.
Communication and consent is my biggest things. And everyone's always asking that. Like, what's the biggest thing you want to talk about? Consent. Always ask your partner, especially if it's someone you're just hooking up with for the first time and it's not your life partner. And communication, consent, all of it. Just see if it's okay before you start doing these things. Don't just think like, me personally, I love being choked, but if I'm with a man who does not physically feel comfortable putting his hand around my throat because he has never done it, doesn't know how to do it right, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But you have to communicate that.
Yeah.
And this is another thing. I love being choked, but there are times where I have sex that day, I don't want your hand around my throat. Mm-hmm. I just want to make love. I don't want to be fucked hard.
Yeah.
So
moods change
constant consent. Just because I gave you consent a week ago to slap me across the face, that does not give you consent for a week down the line to do it again.
Exactly.
Like consent can constantly change. That's why you have to constantly be communicating.
Mm-hmm. There's so much in sex that is the exact same thing in just regular office life.
Yeah.
Hey, do you want to come and get pizza with me during lunch today? Yeah. If you say yes to me today, it doesn't mean that you're going to say yes to me tomorrow. Yeah. And I should not get upset or pissed off or demand that I, force pizza down your throat because, oh my gosh, yesterday you said you were going to you're going to get pizza with me, right?
100%.
Like the same thing that happens in the office is the same thing that should happen in the bedroom. You have this communication, you have discussions, you talk about what you might want to add into it or not do today, and that's totally normal.
Okay, what are some myths that people generally follow or spread today that is absolutely not true? Like people say, oh, like you can't get an STD if you use condoms. What's another example that you're constantly having to fight back and forth with to prove the truth in?
That there are other ways that you can't get pregnant.
Say it again. Let's talk about it.
I mean, I've heard the gamut, right? Like you should douche after. Please do not.
Please.
Douching in general, not a healthy thing at all. Your vagina cleans itself. It is a beautiful, wonderful entity that knows how to like regulate itself. I like a couple of years ago, I had someone tell me that they like douched with bleach or something, and I was just like beyond shocked.
No.
Yeah.
Don't. And if you ever do, because as a performer, we douche before scenes. Like we clean out our vaginas, obviously, and our buttholes, but we never use the liquid that's inside either. Like vinegar, you should not be putting inside your vagina. Like I wash it out, like wash the actual douche out, and then dump warm water in. But primarily, you should not ever douche. It's really
no.
not
I'm
good for
talking
you.
about like the ones that are like with the chemicals,
Yeah.
of like the floral scents that will make your
please stop doing that.
pussy smell like rain.
Your
or
vagina is
something.
not supposed to smell like fucking flowers. It's
No.
supposed to smell like a vagina. Like
Exactly.
it's normal. Like if you have a foul smelling, go get looked at, but it should not smell like flowers. Like it's okay just to smell like a vagina.
The same as like a dick smells like a dick.
Yeah. Genitals smell like genitals.
Yes, exactly. I guess the other ones. Oh, what else? There's one that I get hit over a lot.
Yeah, don't douche if you think
like
if you
that
think
they're
it's gonna
only like once you find the way. Well, first I get a lot of women don't really masturbate or don't need to masturbate, right? Like, and
total lies.
And this comes from women, right?
Oh, of course.
No,
of course.
I mean, I have heard so many girls and
women are the worst sometimes. Like if you're not open, and I've met a lot of women on both sides. If women can be the worst sometimes. Like most of the hate that I get is from women, mind you.
I could believe
like you should all be supporting each other, empowering each other. But yeah, most of the biggest.
I also think it's just also a lot of information that women have received earlier on that like women are the gatekeepers of sexuality.
Of course.
If you look at some of the sex education curricula that are given out at schools in certain states, it is like terrifying.
I bet.
Basically, like portraying boys or anyone with a lot of testosterone, like with like unmanageable sexual desire, and girls or anyone with estrogen, basically like
you're not
being
supposed to get horny. You're not supposed to masturbate.
It's like all clothes. It's all
your pussy's only to be used to get pregnant, and that's it.
Yeah,
like that's all you're used for.
So I think that this is a lot of like that kind of more extreme information is like disseminated and kind of put out in like more subdued messaging, that a woman's pleasure is not as important, that it's not, that you have to find it through another person, that on your own it's not as valid, or you're going to become, I don't know, some crazy person or something. So I think a lot of that stems from that.
Of course.
But it's really sad. I mean, to the point that I don't just teach children and young adults. I teach people and talk about sex education in their bodies for people that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, when your pelvic floor is not as strong because you haven't gotten in touch with your own body, when people after pregnancy and after having multiple births, when our bodies change and shift, what to do in order to make sure that you don't pee when you cough, and like strengthening those pelvic floor muscles. A part of that is masturbation.
Really? I didn't know that. I learned
because
something.
you're using the muscles within your pelvic floor when you are masturbating, and specifically when you're orgasming. So, and this is one of the reasons why certain people can't orgasm or have problems with orgasms, because their muscles are a bit weaker, and so they have a harder time feeling that clench and release, and all those kind of good things. So yes, that's
amazing.
So those are kind of the
things. You should see the
things.
smile on my face. That's crazy.
Damn.
It's amazing.
So another myth that we get, I say this story a lot. I had a teacher who worked at a nursing home, and this was extremely sad. Each room had windows on the doors into the personal apartments of each of these of all the clients there, right? And the nursing home said it was for like the safety of the clients.
Patient,
they weren't patients because they were living there, but yes, in some ways if they needed medical help. And so what the unfortunate effect was that anyone who would walk by those doors could see inside where the person was in bed. So when they were masturbating, when they were having sex with their neighbor, or specifically, and this was the one that really disturbed me the most, when the kids who are now in their 30s, 40s, and 50s visited their mom or their dad in the nursing home, they would freak out and start screaming at the staff because they would catch their parents having sex, or their dad having sex with the lady next door or the man next door. And they would be like, you can't allow them to do that. He cannot do that. And there's this like crazy myth that, I'm sorry, I cross the threshold of like 60, and what does this mean? This body no longer is alive. Like, your body should have sex if you want to, till you are freaking getting in the freaking ground or in the crematorium. Like, you should ideally die having sex. Like, be happy, you know, like. And so there's like, so these kiddos are like offended that their parents had sex, even though the reason we are here is because someone had sex.
Yeah,
like,
100%.
I can't say that enough. Like, I get so upset at it. So we're all here because someone fucked. Like, sorry to burst your bubble, you know? So
Oh man, I wish I could go on for like 6 more hours with this, and we're gonna have to bring her back because there's just so much I still want to cover, but we are running out of time here, Nicolette. I want to say thank you so much for educating me and our viewers and our guests and everyone on this podcast. Is there anything you want to say before you peace out?
I think that's about it. You can find me. I run an organization called Appassionato, appassionato.com. I go out and give lectures and talk to people one-on-one. The big thing is I'm not a therapist, and I want to kind of outline this. Like, I can always refer if someone comes up to me and says, I'm having these issues, let's talk about them. And if I, in the first couple of sessions, discover, this stems from abuse or this stems from a crisis in your life, then that I would refer you to another professional, because that's not my forte.
Absolutely.
I talk more about more general, much more
just informing.
overall information. If it goes much deeper into trauma, into abuse, then that's someone else that has a different qualification than I do. But everything else of talking about bodies, what you should do with a person, birth control, healthy relationships, communication, all that stuff is my area of expertise.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We will see you guys on the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.